Welcome to the Dr. Tom Show. I'm very excited about this episode because I'm going to be sharing with you my personal experiences working at Dentaltown over 22 of my now 30-year career as a dentist. I did all of this while simultaneously working full-time in private practice. And before we get started with the episode, I want to encourage my listeners to share your comments, questions, or suggestions through my website, drtom.show. That's drtom.show. Now, let's get started. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different because it's personal and it's a reflection of my experiences. Everything that I'm sharing today is from my perspective. I'm not speaking on behalf of Dentaltown or anyone else for that matter. These are reflections on what I observed, what I experienced, and what I learned over these many years. And in order to really tell this story, I need to start at the end. About a year ago, I was let go from Dentaltown. After 22 years, they said, "It's over, pal. Goodbye. You can call it whatever you want, but needless to say, it was painful time for me." And this is what happened. One Monday morning, as I was working away in my practice, I got a text message from Lori, the president of Dentaltown, and she wanted to meet with me in person as soon as possible. Lots of things had been changing, and ladies and gentlemen, this is an old saying, but it goes like this. If you're ever invited to a meeting with no agenda, you are the agenda. And that's quite literally what happened to me. So at the end of that day, when Lori and I sat down at a restaurant near my office, and I've known Lori for 25 years, so one look in her eyes, and I knew she was there to deliver some bad news. And before she could start with that unpleasant task, I just said to her, "Lori, this is the end, isn't it?" And she said yes. And I said, "Lori, at this point, based on everything that's going on, I'm not mad or sad, really. But I am disappointed. I'm disappointed that the man that I worked with, supported, and oftentimes defended over the last 25 years didn't give me the courtesy of a written note, an email, or even a phone call." I guess that's water under the bridge at this point. The reality is that when you get let go from a place, departures are rarely a surprise, and this one was no different. As I said, many things were in flux. Many new things were happening, and a number of them were not things that I could endorse or be enthusiastic about, because the values, the mission, and direction of the company was changing in a way that didn't suit me. And since the beginning, my nickname inside the company was the voice of reason. And at this point in time, reason was just told to leave. But this episode isn't really about the termination. It's about how we got there. And for that, we really need to start at the beginning. The origin story of Dentaltown is not what a lot of people expect. In fact, I've told this story to friends over the years, and they're really surprised to hear how it all happened. When I first started working for Howard, I was an associate in his dental practice, and I started in the year 2000, shortly after Dentaltown had launched. These were early days, exciting times, because Dentaltown was a startup. The office was in a small space across the parking lot from the dental practice. And in it, this group of people banded together to build this wonderful company. But Dentaltown, when it first started, was really a site intended to sell dental supplies. Well, that sounds strange, doesn't it? But what it was, in the world of dentistry, as many of you will know, there are companies that sell directly to dentists. Think of Ultradent or Bisco, for example. companies that you call directly and order materials from. So the idea was hatched that what if we could take a catalog of all these individual direct selling companies and put their products on a single website where a dentist would have one place to go and they could order all of these different supplies. And that website on the back side would parse that order, send it to the individual companies for fulfillment, and in the process, collect a small commission for making this order happen. Not a bad idea, really, but it didn't work out. The supply side just wasn't happening for a variety of reasons, but there was a little magazine that was being sent out every month to try to encourage people to try this new website. And just as it happens, the company that built the original website happened to throw in a little message board module, just as kind of an add-on. It was an off-the-shelf thing that they plugged into the website so that visitors would have something else to do, a way to communicate with each other. Remember, these were early days of the internet. This is 1999. And so there was no social media of any type as we know it today. Well, what happened was while the supply selling didn't take off, this little message board did. These dentists would come and find this website where they could talk to each other, they could share the troubles they were having in their practice, and they found a place where they no longer had to practice all alone. The company made a very wise pivot at this point and began to focus on a community that was developing, because this was a place where anybody could ask any question, share a case, confess a mistake they made, and make new relationships with people that were all over the country and eventually all over the world. To this day, it continues to amaze me the stories that people will share online. One of the things that Dentaltown has wrestled with over the years was allowing members to be anonymous. The vast majority of members sharing online go under a screen name, which is not uncommon on a message board. And that is a double-edged sword, because hiding behind a screen name can allow somebody to be unkind, to criticize, or simply be a bully. The flip side of that, though, is that by having a screen name, by having the protection of being anonymous, it also allows people to share deeply personal issues. Dentists would get on there and talk about that they think that they need to be divorced. Office manager would come on and share a story of how the office was embezzled from. Associates could share stories of how they were being treated poorly, or if somebody was interested in buying a practice, they could share some basic details of the practice that they were interested in and get input from accountants and other dentists and consultants that were on the website. It was an incredible resource for people to share things online. And by taking away that burden of identifying yourself, people were so free to share. It was incredible. In fact, one of the things that has always stuck out to me over the many years that I worked there was how many people would send personal notes and letters and emails saying that this site saved their practice. This site helped them professionally when they were at their lowest, and it gave them an outlet to get support. So many dentists over the years would come on the site when they were feeling run down, when they were feeling burned out, or they were having trouble with their team or a patient, and would get the support of strangers all over the world. This is really what makes our profession special. Facilitating our ability to interact with each other is one of the great gifts that Dentaltown has given the profession of dentistry. Now, for the bad side of anonymity, we had moderators that would help do the job of keeping the peace. This was meant to be polite and respectful debate. This is meant to be disagreement, but with some level of professionalism. And while that wasn't always the case, the moderators did the tireless, thankless job of trying to keep the peace. And this group of moderators, they did this as volunteers. They so loved what the community had to offer that they were willing to give their time to try to help continue great conversation online and try to avoid the disputes that sometimes will happen. In 2003, after I had left the dental practice as an associate and opened my own dental practice a year prior, I was invited to become the first and now only dental editorial director for Dentaltown magazine. In those early days, my role was focused on content for the magazine, which at the time was a pretty thin little magazine, but we had these robust conversations happening online. And I would select a few of those discussions and edit them down so that they would be still a clear conversation, but without any off-topic comments or repetitive replies, so that the person reading the magazine would have a very tight, concise conversation that they could enjoy and learn something from. But more than that, we wanted these conversations to draw those people in to become members of the website so that they could contribute to conversations or even ask questions of their own. This was the flywheel that began to develop between the magazine and getting people converted to be online members. It was a blast. It was so much fun to see people discover this new resource month after month and year after year. Over time, my role grew. I started to write a monthly column called Professional Courtesy. I did interviews. I reviewed submissions from authors, and I would write questions for the monthly poll that would appear in the magazine. Over time, I attended the major trade shows. And at those trade shows, I was able to put my ear to the ground and hear what was happening in our profession. I also supported our sales team by meeting with companies that were advertisers in the magazine to be sure that we were meeting their needs as an outlet for their ads. You see, communities like this, and really all of the dental magazines that you're familiar with that you get for free in the mail, we call them trade publications. They operate on advertising revenue. It's a very obvious and simple model, but nevertheless, it has to be a good benefit for both parties. We have to provide content that readers want to consume, and the advertisers want access to people that are going to buy their products. Through the relationships at Dentaltown, I was honored to serve as a key opinion leader for a number of major dental manufacturers. What does that mean? That means that major dental manufacturers would invite small groups of dental professionals in so that they could hear the voice of their customers. They could share products and materials that were in development and get feedback. Was this a good direction? Was this a good idea? And so on. Over the years, as my role at Dentaltown grew, I created countless video segments. They were news segments, trade show reports, and I also served as a moderator for all of our live webinars. I did all of this while working full-time in my dental practice and raising a family with my wife. And I want to say here that having two jobs as a dentist is a lot. Having a full-time practice is enough for most of us. And adding to that the time spent doing these many things for Dentaltown was difficult. The stress of balancing these things often created conflict for me. And I have to say here that I was driven by two things. I wanted to set an example for my kids that I'm a hard worker and that I really believed in the mission of Dentaltown, enough that I would do the extra time and the extra work to keep that moving forward. But it wasn't always fair to my kids or my wife that some of the time that I was away from home traveling impacted them. And for that, I have some regret. But nevertheless, I have to own the choices I made over the years. This community, as it grew, eventually grew into live conversation, and that was done through the Townie meeting. This is another great story because there's a dentist named Tarun Agarwal from North Carolina who had met Dr. Samir Puri on Dentaltown. And Tarun was making a trip to California to attend a CE conference. And he asked Samir if he might stay with him at his house. Samir generously obliged, and as the two sat across the table from each other over that weekend, they realized how much fun it was to meet a fellow dental professional that they had only previously known as another member of this online community. So at that time, they hatched the idea of, why don't we start a dental meeting that would invite all of these people from this online community to be together in Las Vegas once a year. They presented their idea to our team and received a blessing to go ahead and start hosting the Townie meeting. Our organization was not big enough to handle this task, so having somebody else take that on was a great benefit. And for the next 13 or 14 years, the Townie meeting happened every year in Vegas, and it was a blast. It was continuing education. It was parties and celebrations. And it was exhibitors. Companies that had been supporting this community since the beginning were also excited to meet the members from the website. This was a family reunion of sorts, and it was a time when the community bonds were growing and the site was flourishing. Around the time that COVID came, the Townie meeting ceased to happen. Things have changed in the dental world when it comes to meetings and being in person because the COVID times made it so easy to do things remotely, to do things online, and meetings of all sorts have suffered. The other thing that happened over the years was the birth of social media. We always referred to Dentaltown as Facebook for dentists before Facebook existed, because that's true. This was really a singular site where dental professionals could gather and share and talk, and nothing else could really come close to it. Facebook didn't come on the scene until 2004, and even in the early days of Facebook, it was a pretty primitive site. Facebook has since developed private groups and other ways for people with special interests to get together and share. Twitter came along in 2006, now called X. Instagram came along in 2010, and TikTok in 2018. With the rise of social media channels, our attention was being divided more ways. Our time is still our time, but there were more things that were competing for our attention. Dentaltown, however, still maintains the distinct advantage of being solely focused on dental professionals, whereas other sites will give you a jumble of your professional interests as well as your friends and family's food and vacation photos. So that's a nice thing about Dentaltown. When you go there, you're going to still be interacting with other dental people. That can be dental hygienists, dentists, lab people, salespeople, and such. One of the other things, though, that's critical for social media companies of all types are the influencers. Any social media site will have maybe 1 or 2% of their population of members that are really frequent and excellent contributors. And all of those sites that I mentioned began to create opportunities for monetization and brand control. And those things didn't really exist on Dentaltown. The members of Dentaltown benefited because they got access to a free site and some great resource. And the best contributors had the opportunity to make a name for themselves, which many did. But one of the things that happened over the years is that some of those great contributors went to other outlets. They found other places where they could have more control over their platform, their brand, call it whatever you like. and the other major social media sites understood this. Because any site online, similar to the trade magazines I talked about earlier, they make their money from the people that are visiting the site. You're not paying to use any of these social media sites, so they're selling the eyeballs, so to speak, by placing advertising intermixed with the content people are consuming on their website. As Dentaltown, following that same pattern, collected millions in revenue over the years through advertising, there really wasn't a mechanism in place to reward the top contributors that helped with that growth. So as people would leave for other opportunities, that affects the amount of interaction on the website, because these are the people that are generating the conversation, and these are the conversations that people are coming to read. In my opinion, if you don't create incentives for your most valuable contributors, it becomes harder to retain them. One of the examples would be Dr. Samir Puri, the guy who co-founded the Townie meeting. Well, at one point along the way, he left Dentaltown and started his own online community for CEREC owners that was called CEREC Doctors. Nowadays, I think they refer to it as cdocs.com. They had great success doing that, and that's just one example. Fast forwarding to the more recent times, the continued competition for time and attention had fragmented our loyal audience, and this decline, combined with other factors, led to the founder's declaration that Dentaltown would become an AI company. What did this mean? Lots of ideas were kicked around, automating everything from sales to accounting to editorial, building an AI practice management software that could talk to QuickBooks, and a chatbot based on 25 years of member-generated content. Since this has always been a community to me, some of these were difficult concepts to wrap my head around. The chatbot, though, seemed very timely because we were at this time seeing early versions of ChatGPT, Gemini, and others. So think about it. You have 25 years of content, millions of posts. If you put those together to train a chatbot, you could now talk to the sum total of knowledge shared by all of these thousands of dentists over the years. But I went into voice of reason mode and started to ask some questions. If the chatbot is going to answer most of the questions, why would we continue to interact with each other? Is the quality of the chatbot going to be superior, since a good portion of that training data could be dentists arguing about politics or COVID mandates? It could be people talking about their vacations or people arguing about something that wasn't related to dentistry. Sometimes people would make comments that were wrong, but other people would correct them. None of that nuance can be filtered for when you're taking all of those conversations and lumping them together to train a chatbot. And if we start using this chatbot to respond to human posts, will there be anything left for the other humans to say? These were serious concerns of mine because, as I said many times already, Dentaltown has always been about a community of real people sharing real stories and struggles in their practice lives and personal lives and helping each other out. Building a chatbot just as a task is extremely difficult. If you're paying attention to the world of AI, which most certainly you probably are, the folks that run Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and others are spending millions and billions of dollars to continue to improve their products. So, could our little chatbot compete with the answers even on dental topics that those other providers can share? I'll leave that to you. But as we approach 2 years since that bold promise was made, the chatbot still has not been released on Dentaltown. AI has replaced some of my duties, however. Remember I mentioned one of my tasks over the 22 years was to select threads for publication in the magazine. I would edit those threads in a way that kept credit for the people that made the comments, but also kept the conversation tight enough to fit the pages of the magazine. Those message board conversations still appear in a way in the magazine, but they're now no longer carefully edited conversations, preserving the identity of the members that contribute. Rather, they're AI-generated summaries, mashing the careful thoughts into a summary without personality. So the value of Dentaltown wasn't that it produced one definitive answer to a question. It was that it hosts disagreement. You could see 10 experienced clinicians approach a problem differently. You could watch the reasoning unfold before your eyes. And you could see respectful debate on hot topics of the day. You can still do that. That's all still there for you to consume and enjoy. And I'm grateful for the 25 years I spent building something that matters to dentists. Dentaltown played a very important role in my career and in the profession at large. So I've always been very proud of my association with this company. And AI does have a place in dentistry. It's already improving our diagnostics, imaging. It's helping with new workflows and efficiency. Dentistry, however, is always going to be a human endeavor in spite of all the technological advances we make. So interacting directly with your fellow professionals and your patients is not going to be replaced by a machine. It may enhance the experience. It may make some parts of the experience easier, but at the end of the day, these are humans delivering solutions to other humans. Don't miss out on the beauty of that interaction. That's all I have to share for now, but I'd love to hear your questions and your comments, and you can send those through my website at drtom.show. That's drtom.show. Thanks for listening. I look forward to getting in your ear in another episode down the road.